Today, we're doing something a bit different. We're kind of traveling back in time, our mission, to really unpack the year 1959 in the United States. Now, you might think of it as, quiet prosperity, maybe a bit buttoned up. But what if it was actually this hinge moment, sort of bubbling with things under the surface, sowing seeds for, the really huge changes of the decade that followed? We've got our hands on some great sources, specifically looking at 1959 American life, culture, and change. And we're going to pull out those surprising facts, those key nuggets that show how this one year really laid the groundwork.
It really is a fascinating period, precisely because that calm surface, like you said, it was hiding some pretty significant shifts. Economically, socially, we're aiming to pull back the curtain a bit, see how the hopes and dreams of the time showed up in everyday American life.
Okay, so let's start there with the economy, an economic snapshot of 59. Because the U.S. economy was really booming then, right? That whole post-war thing.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, though, when you hear prosperity, what did that actually feel like financially for the average person? What did it mean day to day?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that prosperity figure, the average household income, it hit about $5,400. Now, that might not sound like a lot today, obviously. But back then, it wasn't just a number, it sort of represented this tipping point. Suddenly, you had way more families than ever before who could afford more than just the basics. They had money for, discretionary spending.
So that's the key. Not just getting by, but actually buying stuff.
Exactly. It really cemented that consumer-driven middle class, which, became the engine for so much of what came next culturally, too.
Okay, and talking about buying stuff, that purchasing power really comes alive when you look at specific costs. Like a new car. The average price was around $3,200. And here's something that jumped out at me. Maybe surprising for car buffs. 1959 is when Ford unveiled the concept for what became the Mustang.
Oh, the concept, not the final car yet.
Right. The production model was still a few years off, but that early idea, that hint of it in 59, you can almost see the start of that, like symbol of youth and freedom it became. It wasn't just a car, it felt like a preview.
That's interesting, setting the stage even then.
Yeah, and if you needed somewhere to park that eventual Mustang, a new house, the average cost was up to about $29,000, which for a lot of people felt like, okay, maybe we can get that place in the suburbs. It fueled that whole trend.
Right, the suburban dream taking shape.
But if you were more of a city person, average rent was around $130 a month, still accessible. And groceries. For a family of four, maybe $70 a week on average, which suggests, not just enough food, but probably a decent variety available too.
Those numbers, they really paint a picture, don't they? You see the growing buying power, the lifestyle people were aiming for. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about achieving that American dream. And it felt like it was actually within reach for many.
Yeah, but, and this is important, while many were chasing that dream, others were still fighting just for the basic right to chase it. So beneath that surface prosperity, things were, pretty lively politically, especially around civil rights. Let's maybe shift focus there. What was happening on that front?
Absolutely crucial point, because, how does change actually build momentum? The civil rights movement was gaining serious ground in 59. Activists were pushing harder than ever, desegregation, voting rights.
Yeah, you hear about the big moments later, but 59 was heating up.
It really was. And something maybe less known, but really significant. The first national Black political convention happened that year. This wasn't just, a meeting. It was huge. It created this unified national platform. Leaders could strategize together, push for political power in a coordinated way. It kind of centralized things that had often been more local before, really laid groundwork for the big legislative fights ahead.
Wow, okay, that's a key piece. So you've got this domestic stuff, the economy humming, civil rights demanding attention. But you also can't forget the global picture. The Cold War shadow was definitely there. So international affairs, lots of tension in the headlines, right?
Or constantly. You couldn't escape it. 1959 was the year the Cuban Revolution wrapped up. Batista was overthrown. Fidel Castro came to power. And you can bet the U.S. was watching that very closely. Cuba's right there, strategically vital.
So close to home.
Exactly. So you have this really interesting mix, this juxtaposition. You've got incredible prosperity for many at home, these really important social movements building. But underneath it all, there's this definite hum of global anxiety.
Do you think that anxiety maybe, influenced what people wanted from their entertainment? Like escape? Or maybe something else?
That's a really good question. Plausible, right? Culture often reflects and distracts. It gives you a way to kind of process things or Maybe just forget them for a bit.
Okay, so let's dive into that.
Uh,
What was America watching and listening to? The culture in 59, it was definitely flourishing. Music, TV, huge influence.
yeah, these were the big cultural touchstones. They created a kind of shared experience for millions, gave people something common to talk about, reflected the mood.
Totally. And that shared experience, well, the #1 song that year, The Battle of New Orleans by Johnny Horton.
Mm.
Huge hit, really catchy, told a story, kind of a folk history thing that lots of people liked.
Right, that storytelling aspect was big.
And then TV, Sunday nights, basically everyone was watching The Ed Sullivan Show.
Mm.
Still the #1 show, had everything, musicians, comedians, all sorts of acts. It was just the show, a real fixture in American homes.
Yeah, a cultural unifier in a way.
Definitely. You can almost picture families gathered around the TV set, right? Or listening to the radio together. Entertainment felt more collective back then.
Yeah.
Shared in the home.
Yeah, that shared national experience fostered right there in the living room.
And that sense of identity, it also showed up in, well, how people look. Let's talk fashion. And also innovation, because 59 had this mix of like sophisticated style, but also youthful energy and some big tech leaps too. So clothes shopping. For men, a stylish suit, maybe around $80. Casual stuff like shirts and slacks, maybe $40. You see that move towards like still looking sharp, but maybe a bit more relaxed, less strictly formal.
A bit more comfortable, maybe.
Yeah. And for women, elegant dresses, about $55. Styles were very feminine, silhouettes emphasized, often with bright colors, bold patterns, kind of expressing more individuality maybe.
A bit of post-war blossoming, perhaps? And connecting back to that Cold War anxiety we mentioned. Military folks, their monthly pay was around $350, which kind of highlights how important maintaining that strong military presence felt. These were the people on the front lines of that global tension. Resources going their way were seen as critical.
Right, part of the national strategy. But it wasn't all about defense spending or fashion. Innovation was really taking off in like totally different areas at once. So this year, the U.S. launches the first nuclear-powered submarine, the USS Triton.
Wow, nuclear-powered, that's a game changer.
Totally, it wasn't just another sub. Nuclear engine meant it could stay submerged for months, travel thousands of miles without refueling. It basically revolutionized naval warfare, gave the U.S. this incredible global reach, stealth, huge for the Cold War, happening, under the sea.
A whole different level of strategic capability.
Exactly. And then completely different world, consumer tech. 1959 is the year Mattel introduced the first Barbie doll.
Barbie, okay, that's iconic.
Right. And she quickly became more than just a toy. A cultural icon, reflected aspirations, maybe shaped them too for girls. Ended up in pretty much every household eventually.
It's amazing, isn't it? You've got this cutting-edge military tech designed for global power plays, and then a doll that would define childhood for generations and spark endless debates about, image and consumerism, both emerging in the same year. It just shows the sheer range of innovation happening. The future was being built, piece by piece in all these different ways.
What a year, 1959. When you really unpack it, it was so rich with change, development, this real spirit of innovation, cultural shifts, social progress pushing forward. You had the economic boom changing how people lived, the civil rights movement demanding justice, those Cold War anxieties humming underneath all at once.
It absolutely set the stage for the 60s. That transformative decade didn't come out of nowhere. So much of the groundwork, the tensions, the shifts, it was laid right there in 59, a real hinge moment, like you said, swinging from one era into a very different future for America.
It really was. So thinking about all that groundwork laid in 1959, the money, the culture, the politics, the social movements, those wild innovations, what bits from that year do you think actually ended up having the most unexpected impact? Or maybe the most profound, looking back now? Something for you all to chew on. Until next time.